Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. This is Warrior TV, the voice of the mental health warriors. And I am joined today by the lovely G, and we are going to be talking about domestic abuse. See you in a moment. Welcome, G. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And how are you this afternoon, Kerry?
Yes, I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Sort of managing to keep warm, even though I've got no heating at the moment. At least it's not too cold, eh?
Yeah, not quite just yet.
Yeah, not yet. I'm always a little bit reluctant to put the heating on, even though it's October. But yeah, I've got jumpers.
I was just going to say, what a beautiful kind of week to be talking about what we're going to talk about today, because of course it's Domestic Violence Month, Awareness Month, and it's also Mental Health Week this week. So what a beautiful week for this all to tie in together.
Most definitely. Yes, it's and as we know, that mental health is something that is always affected when it comes to being on the receiving end of domestic abuse. But we also know that domestic abuse isn't always violent, don't we?
Yeah.
It's very often, there's always going to be a degree of mental abuse and a degree of emotional abuse in there. And I think for many people, and this is not to sort of reduce the severity or the seriousness of it, but the physical abuse tends to be is part of it for a lot of people, but it's not necessarily the biggest part, although it can be the most dangerous in some circumstances.
I totally agree with you, Kerry. So if we broke down the mental abuse from the domestic violent abuse, I totally agree with you. The domestic violent is the kind of short-term physical, harm to yourself. And like you said, it can be detrimental as well, which is, that's sadly always the risk that comes with if you're in a situation like that. But absolutely understand where you're coming from, that actually the mental abuse is the long-term effects. And, sometimes you don't even realize what effect that has had on you until a very, very long time after. And, from my personal experience, when I was experiencing both domestic and, domestic violence and mental abuse, I still hadn't quite recognized that I was actually receiving mental abuse until I kind of came out of the situation. And then you say, goodness me, they're actually related. They were, the mental abuse actually started long before the physical abuse. So it's this is why I'm so grateful where we have platforms like this that just raises that awareness, because you and I both can speak from experience, but it's that experience that we want to empower other people to never be in that situation at all. Or if they are, immediately to go, I recognize these signs here. There's something not quite right.
Oh, absolutely. We spoke a few weeks ago, didn't we, prior to coming on here and talking about this. So it was interesting, I think, to hear each other's own personal experiences of it, because let's face it, no two people's experiences are going to be absolutely identical. Our own personal experiences of a particular situation, in this instance, domestic abuse, will be very different from the next person's. And that is all as a result of our own previous experiences throughout our lives, my own personal experience was more mental and emotional based, rather than physical, although there was a little bit of physical occasionally thrown in for good measure, But I think what helped me was the fact that I've always been pretty strong-willed, strong-minded. However, there is still that key thing, isn't there? That, no matter how many times and how many friends and family are saying to you, you need to get out of there, until you're in the right space and mindset yourself to know that it's the right thing for you to do.
Yeah.
And that you believe that you will actually survive on your own. Nobody can actually force you to do something you're not ready to do. So you have to make up your own mind in your own time, don't you, really?
And I can totally relate to that, Kerry, because that's exactly how it was for me. So for me personally, just like yourself, I considered myself a very strong lady, one that was of happiness. And then when I started experiencing it, I still portray to the outside world I was this strong lady, that there was nothing going on at home, that everything was okay. And then, of course, there comes a breaking point. But my breaking point came after 5 years of silence. So 5 years of not telling anyone what was going on, and being that kind of almost shielding the other person involved, that everything was okay. But just as you said, it had to be my time, as it was your time, that this is when you've got the courage to actually take the next step that is required. And again, like you said, it's about how you've been brought up, it's about your environment, it's about so many other factors than just when people say leave that situation. When you're in that situation, you're assessing the possibilities in your head of, okay, if I play out this role, this may happen. And then of course fear plays in there as well. And one thing I've said previously to other people, I call it very much the yo-yo effect. You can absolutely make steps forward, but then you make so many more steps back to that same situation, and then you do it again, and then it almost becomes like, some people may consider it almost like the boy who cried wolf. Are you in danger? Are you not in danger? Are you receiving abuse? Are you not? And this is, I think, also a great opportunity for us to share with people that it's the state of confusion, it's the mental health of the person on the receiving end that's not in good stead. It's those things that people need to be mindful of, that yes, if you're lending your ear, lend it to them, but also know that they might need you again, and they might come several times before they actually make that decision to say goodbye to a past that needs to become a past. So yeah, I think this is what's great, that the more we share with people, it's not as simple for the person on the receiving end. No. And yeah, so there's several factors sadly confusing them.
No, you're absolutely right. As we've said just now, I think the biggest part of the whole domestic abuse issue is the mental abuse. It's the mentally knocking you down and telling you that you're unworthy, you're not doing this right, you're not doing that right, and it gets to a point where no matter what you do, it's wrong. So you then actually start to believe yourself, don't you, that I am useless, I am worthless, I don't deserve better than this, and I'm clearly very incapable, and everything else. I know that's kind of the route that I went down, but I didn't go down completely, because there was always that little niggling voice at the back of my mind that was going, there's nothing wrong with what you're doing. It's just that the other person doesn't like it.
Yeah.
But at the time, I didn't realize what was actually going on.
And this is the danger, Kerry. This is why, talking about being on the receiving end of mental abuse, you don't even know you're in or on the receiving end. Manipulation is such a wicked, characteristic for somebody to be like portraying onto somebody. But sometimes, as you said, they're so convincing. They're convincing to the fact that it's like reverse they're reversing the role, but they're actually reflecting, they're projecting out to you what actually is going on inside of them, but they're saying it to you as you're the callous person, or you're the inconsiderate person, or you're the one taking them away from something so beautiful and so forth. So I totally agree with you. And it's I am pretty certain there's probably many people in relationships right now unaware that they're mentally being compromised and are in unhealthy relationships. So yeah, just
it's quite a fine line though, isn't it? Where do you actually draw that line?
So I think first and foremost, and you actually said something very critical, which was self-worth. Knowing your self-worth first is the starting point. And it takes us all a long time, most of us a long time, to actually realize what our worth is. And your worth becomes more the more you love yourself. Your worth becomes more the more you realize opportunities, and the more you build up your steam. And so I think that's the starting point, understanding that you're really connected with yourself and knowing yourself truly before you can then share yourself with someone. So this is something I've had to learn myself, getting those healthy boundaries in place and underestimating how they protect you. So having those healthy boundaries, understanding what's comfortable and uncomfortable for me. So then you have an option when someone treads on you and that feels uncomfortable, you can either discuss it with them and you genuinely feel that they're not going to be behave in that way with you again, or you decide to walk away. And it always comes back to that choice, and if you've decided to give them another chance, I would just say openly, do not give them a second chance. You can give someone one chance, because there's always that what if. Give them that what if, but if it happens again and again, it becomes a repeating pattern, and you're literally saying to that person, hey, do what you want with me. So that's
nail on the head. Absolutely nail on the head. As you say, the first time is the first time. You have the conversation with that person. You feel in your gut, your intuition, whether or not it's that conversation's gone well, and is it going to happen again? Isn't it going to happen again? Mm-hmm. But again, you were absolutely right, because it starts with ourselves. We've got to love ourselves. We've got to respect ourselves.
Yeah.
Because if we don't respect ourselves, we cannot expect anybody else to respect us. Mm-hmm. If we don't love ourselves, we can't expect anybody else to properly, truly love us.
Yeah.
And going back to the first time is the first time. If we allow it to happen again, it's a choice. And again, another choice. And again, another, we choose. A lot of people that I've spoken with, friends in particular, since moving away from that environment, oh crikey, how long ago was it now? About 14, 15 years ago, coming up 15 years, I think. And, the moment I left, I was saying to people, I've kind of, I don't blame anybody for that situation. I don't blame anybody for what happened to me, but I am responsible for what happened to me, because I chose to stay there and I allowed it to continue happening. Even though, towards the end, I was not physically, but metaphorically fighting to stand my ground and say, this is not right, But again, it's gone too far. It all falls on deaf ears.
Yeah.
And I woke up one morning and realised that, the only answer was to get the hell out of there. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I'd made that decision to leave, then all of a sudden, these opportunities arose. And it is about being in the right mindset as well, to see those opportunities for what they actually are.
Yeah.
Being faced with potential redundancy, in the summer of 2007, I could have viewed that as a really bad thing, a really negative thing. And initially, my first thought was, oh, hell, what am I going to do now? But then looking into it further and having a conversation with the MD at the time, he actually came to me and he said, I understand that relocating is an option for you. Would you be interested? And it's like, oh my God.
Yes.
This is my escape route, you know? And it was, I didn't think twice about it. It was like, yeah, I'm doing this. I'm absolutely doing this. And, you know, you can probably imagine it didn't go down particularly well at home, but then it was, you know, I was doing the right thing for me.
Yes. It was the first time in a long time you put yourself forward. And I think there's a quote, I'm not sure who it comes from, but it's something along the lines of everything you're searching for is already within you. And I think that's quite valid for when we're talking about mental health on a receiving end of a domestic type violence or mental abuse. You know, we tend, I almost want to use the metaphor like a bumblebee. You end up collecting pollen from different flowers, which is reflective of your friends. So you start seeking advice from different people, but then you end up coming, you know, you're the joiner, you're the glue back in the end to yourself. So it's almost like, you know, it's that inner strength that kind of need to channel back in. So, you know, and I don't know about you, but when I did start talking about what was going on at home, I was getting more confused, because the more advice you get, the more scenarios that other people start sharing with you, all in good intentions, but that's not helping you personally. And I think, you know, you mentioned something that this is an interesting part, because when we talk about inner strength, when you're on the receiving end of something, where do you get that space? Where do you get that space, that breathing time to really connect with your mental health? Because when you're at home, it wouldn't have been that place. So for me personally, it could have been en route to work. So where I had just, you know, on a bus, and sometimes I'd forget to get off the bus stop because your brain has gone elsewhere thinking time, or it could be at work. So it's almost like, because we have to give time for our brain to like digest. And sometimes that's the kind of scary thing, not being able to be given that time where you're in constant like fight mode, I guess. You know, you're fighting against the battles of work, the battles at home. So it would be, you know, like you said, seeking any little opportunity. So if somebody was personally going through something now, yes, we can't magically make up an hour or 2 hours to reflectively sit somewhere and start connecting. But where in those little moments do you really start thinking about yourself? And then those are the sparks of realizing your worth, and just slowly start, you know, there are triggers in everyone. And it's the positive triggers we want from people to really start putting themselves forward. And some people do call it selfish. It's not selfish. You know, let's just call it what it is. It's you saying, I deserve respect, and this is what I'm going to do. You know, I'm going to do this for myself, my family, if a family is involved, because that's another factor. You know, if there is family involved, children and so forth, I would say be that role model. Take that scary step and be that role model to show the family and the kids that life can be so much happier and healthier in a different environment than being on the receiving end. And something you mentioned, Kerry, so I am totally with you about taking ownership of my experiences. So the ownership I take is, yes, I experienced domestic violence. Yes, I was on the receiving end of mental abuse also. But yes, it was also me that chose to stay in that situation or give the ample of chances. Hence me saying, please don't give more than one chance, because the manipulation becomes so clever and beautiful from the person who's giving you that you end up believing a new version of an excuse or a new version of pampering that this will never happen again. So one chance. If anybody takes anything from this call today, it's one chance only. and then I would say action after that. So if someone's done something wrong to hurt your feelings or physically hurt you, and when it comes, I think let's put the importance on both of them on the same pedestal, physical or mental abuse, both equally very important, because if either of them are featuring in your relationship, question whether your relationship is healthy in the first place. Are they even the right person for you? And are you even ready for being in a relationship right now? That's another question. Enough of us don't spend enough time with ourselves and fully are happy with what opportunities you can achieve by yourself. Most of the times I'm single. It's the most beautiful thing. It's connecting with myself. And it's not a bad thing being by yourself. So if anybody felt the fear of, that dependency towards another, what about the beautiful dependency on yourself and knowing what you said actually gets done because you done what you said you were going to do? So, there's plenty, beautiful reasons to why you should put yourself first.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that whole statement there, G, because I live alone, apart from my two noisy dogs. I'm the only human that lives under this roof, and it's great because I'd never lived on my own until I left that environment. And it was scary. Mm-hmm. It really was scary because up until that point, I believed that I couldn't survive on my own. Mm-hmm. And the fact is, we absolutely can. We are born to survive. We've already got that programming in us. Yeah. It's just all the rest of the crap that we pick up along the way is what we learn from other people. It's what we're taught. It's what we ultimately end up believing, again, from our own experiences. But it is absolutely about respecting ourselves, loving ourselves, as we've mentioned before, and knowing exactly where our boundaries are, what they are, and respecting ourselves enough to not allow people to cross those boundaries or to violate those boundaries.
Yeah.
If we are, I would suggest that, when we do end up going into a relationship and staying in a relationship that is abusive, that we were clearly not in a good place ourselves at the beginning of that relationship, so it is all very much about what we believe. And I think the other thing as well is moving on from that, because I don't know about you, G, but when I left that environment, I was so excited. I was moving from one end of the country to the other. So not only was I getting away from an environment that was completely toxic, I was moving to an area of the country that I'd never been to before, and it was like really, really exciting. Yeah. And, the thought of being able to start afresh, in a place where nobody knows me and I can like recreate myself, if you like. I mean, not in, change me totally, because me essentially is always going to be here.
Yeah.
But to realise not only what I don't want in my life, but also what I do want.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important, is to focus on what you do want. Know what you don't want and what you're not prepared to tolerate, but focus on what you do want, because those things that you do want are going to be the positive things in life. And the more you focus on those, the more you believe that those things will happen, the more you're going to be, I'm going to say, attracting that, but much like the opportunity to, that suddenly it was like, oh, we're going to be made redundant.
Yeah.
Out of that supposed negative situation came a positive opportunity. But I only saw it because my eyes, my mind, my heart was open enough to see it for what it actually was.
And I totally agree with you. I think a great exercise to do when you do come out of a not healthy relationship is to positively affirm by saying, writing, like exactly what you said, what you do want.
Yes.
Once you've established what you don't want, just as you said, let it go. Let
Yeah.
it go. It's the past. Let's
Yeah.
now focus on, some people have morning routines, but, some people have also written down how they want their future partner to be. And that's a great exercise to have. How do you want conversation to be? Where do you want to experience together? Put it all out there, exactly as you said, like the law of attraction, but also, project it out there that it will come to you. And I think, you absolutely have to move on. And I when you said excited, I thought that was exactly the word that I had. I thought, right, now we can start again. Something that seems so far away when you're in that situation, when you've got that constant grey around you, you're not seeing any peak of sunshine. It just doesn't seem. But once you step out of it, goodness me, it's so liberating. I think that's the word I want to say. It's liberating to know that anything you choose to do, and just as you said, the world was your oyster. You could ping a pong across the UK or overseas, wherever you wanted, and it was your time. Yeah,
Definitely, absolutely. I kind of, it was like an exciting adventure for me, but I really, really wanted it. That was the thing. I really, really wanted it. And I knew that I would have that time at some point. I didn't know when, but I knew that it would happen. And as I say, it's having that belief. But also, now, when I don't know about you, G, when I left that environment and I moved away to the other end of the country, I was able to start afresh, as I said before, and that was great. That was absolutely great. And there is a but. It wasn't until several years later that I realized that the difficulties, if you like, the obstacles that I was facing in my life were down to certain experiences that I'd had in that toxic environment. And they'd kind of stayed with me. I didn't realize this at the time, but until I realized that I was having these difficulties, obviously. And when I investigated further and I realized that it was these certain experiences that had stayed with me and they were holding me back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think anyone that's been in that kind of a situation can honestly say that they have experienced similar things later on down the line, and it can be years.
Yes.
It might be that, they've come out of the toxic relationship, they've moved forward, they've met somebody else, they've perhaps, been in that relationship for a number of years. But all of a sudden, these things kind of rear their heads, and they can cause a few issues, can't they?
Absolutely. So exactly same pattern. Years later, it might be because at that point in time I was more self-reflective, or I could start seeing the patterns merging. So one example I can share personally of my own was self-sabotage. Self-sabotaging relationships, in that they wouldn't go over a certain duration because I indirectly didn't know that I actually was doing that to protect myself. So once I did become aware of it, I absolutely knew that was a critical thing I had to overcome. I had to deal, I had to face it. If I was going to move on into a healthy, beautiful relationship, I'd need to understand where this sabotage was coming from. And I would say that those characteristics of sabotaging were never there until after I had experienced what I had experienced. So here is an after effect of receiving the violence and the mental abuse. So you're almost like a pre-programmed default the shelters started coming up, and then it started becoming, oh, this isn't working because, I started finding the too many differences between us, as opposed to thinking that there was no issue with them. And the other thing I'd like to say is that I personally don't think there's enough positive influence from things that we have where we watch from media and so forth. I don't see enough positive relationships. I don't see enough positive, healthy shares of what a beautiful couple this is, because they have such a great, diverse dynamic, and this is how it works. We all thrive on hearing about heartbreak. We all thrive to hear that people are now getting, not that we thrive, but I mean, apologies, this is what is shared with us.
Yes.
So there's constant negativity shared amongst whose marriage didn't work, somebody's done something terrible in a relationship and so forth. I mean, I think that was part of mine. I didn't have enough positive relationships for me to kind of almost see, for me to then have taken into my long-term relationship, where I would be like, this is not how a healthy relationship looks. So there's also that part, which I think, it'd be great to get more of that in the newspapers, in the media, on Instagram, wherever the social media and the media presence is. I think we need to think long term. How are we going to show the next generations? How are we going to change the pattern? How are we going to not have kids that are desensitized by violent, horrific kind of things that they're watching? So I think there's much more work to go to the root causes of what we kind of just blame on surface level, but we kind of need to change a lot of behaviors. So I think we're very far from that, sadly, at this moment in time. So, but I know you and I both would love to be part of the solution. So hence why we talk about things, because this is where mental health saves you. Talk about things. And this is where, if you're on a receiving end of feeling uncomfortable in a relationship, talk about it. That is your opportunity to then assess what your next steps are. You do not have to accept, and it breaks my heart when people settle, because, I was a settler. I settled in an unhealthy, toxic relationship, and I did not have to. So there are decisions there that we can all make. And, I'm loving your smile, Kerry, and I smile a lot too, but, we almost also know the other part of what it took for us to get here. So there's, and I just want people to take hope from this, that, here's two ladies that consider themselves very strong. We went through an experience, and we've come through the other side, and we're here to support both men and women to kind of not go through what we have gone through. And, the ultimate thing is the choice is with you. The choice is with you to what you want to do with your situation.
Absolutely. I couldn't have put it better myself, actually. No, absolutely. Again, nail on the head. And I think it's important to stress here, just to kind of reiterate what you've said, is that we've both of us have been through, equally toxic relationships. We've come out the other side. We have. I don't like labels like victim or survivor, or, but we have survived that. We are here. We're living proof that there is life on the other side. And amazing life on the other side of that toxic environment. And for anybody out there that's thinking, I'd never do it on my own, guess what? As I said earlier, that was me.
Yeah.
And I'm here to prove to you that you can. Anybody absolutely can. It's about changing that mindset and having that strong mindset. And as we've said before, having those boundaries, having self-respect, self-love is also really, really important as well. And I didn't realise this until I was having a conversation with somebody last year. I didn't realise that men were also on the receiving end of domestic abuse. So I loved what you said just now, to raise this awareness for men as well as women.
Yeah.
You know, we hear all about the women, don't we? But we
Yeah.
rarely hear about the men. So for you guys out there that are, you know, watching this, listening to this at whatever time of the day or night that you choose to watch it, there really is help out there, and it's okay. It's absolutely okay to pick up the phone to somebody and say, you know, I'm on the receiving end of domestic abuse and I don't know what to do about it.
Absolutely.
What can I do?
And I think more so, I think men, so I know of men who sadly have received both physical and mental abuse, and some that have received it separately. And I personally think men, in my opinion, are on more receiving end of actually mental abuse. So the mental games that they might be projected against, you know, using the children as pawns, and that there's so many kind of manipulative games and so forth that sadly, you know, again, so where I said I was embarrassed to talk about my situation for 5 years, I feel like men become the, you know, for me to say that I'm not in a good situation is going to, like, you know, it's going to deflate their kind of manhood or something. But I would say, goodness me, no, you know, we're becoming more of a compassionate community, you know, more of a compassionate nation. And it, you know, sadly it took a pandemic for people to realize even more so the importance of mental health, when you had people that were, you know, would never even thought that they would have had a mental issue, but actually were on the receiving end. And I think mental health issues also kind of accelerated because of the close proximity. So could you imagine, and you know, it did happen where you're in close proximity, you can't escape, you're in lockdown, and whether it's a male or female on the receiving end, it absolutely needs to be spoken about, and you absolutely need to, you know, again, going back to what you and I both said, make that decision. Are you gonna discuss it? Are you going to talk it out? And are you going to see that they're truly committed in getting that help? So this is the person who's being abusive, the person who is being manipulative. Are they going to receive help that they need in order to change their behaviors? If there's no such commitment, if there's no such forward steps from that person, then I think you have your answer. So that was something that I wasn't taking serious in my long-term relationship. So there was all the talk, but there was never the action. And I think I would never, ever go back into that situation where, you know, we all know action speaks louder than words, but gosh, did I fall a fool to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's also there are also the people out there that the abusers, for want of a better way of describing them, again, hate labels, but that actually truly believe that there's nothing wrong with what they're doing and saying and how they're behaving. That they honestly believe that.
So my answer to that would be, don't give them another chance. If they're not in a position to understand how their behaviors are hurting other people around them, so why would you stand around being the victim, or, you know, being on the receiving end again and again? So if you already realize that someone doesn't realize what they're doing is wrong, then I think you have your answer. And I think one thing we fail to do, and I've done this, you then try to become the fixer, or you then try to justify their behavior, or you then try to make a reason on their behalf. No reasons are required. No excuses are required. If they said they're doing nothing wrong, that means I will do what I like. So it comes back to self-worth. Are you worth better than being treated in a certain way that you're not happy about? Yes. So why are you going to even entertain the thought that this person doesn't even give a second thought about your feelings?
Absolutely. So moving on from that as well, you know, encouraging people, again, men as well as women, to reach out, to realize, acknowledge what is going on within their relationships, to know that they are worthy of so much better in life. When reaching out, who can they reach out to, apart from obviously everybody in in the Mental Health Warriors team. But organisations, I know there's one that you particularly support, isn't there?
Yes, so I'm an ambassador for the Aanchal Women's Aid charity, and they're based in East London. It is predominantly ladies, so it's a safe place for ladies, but they very much know my mission to kind of make it more diverse. So, you know, it might be a different program at some point in the future, but predominantly it's ladies at the moment that they support. Equally, as you know, I wrote a poetry book that came years later. So again, that's part of my healing process. So I wrote my book, which it's there to support people to, even if they're not sure whether they're going through abuse or not, here's my personal take and some reflective takes of other people's experiences from myself of this is what mental abuse felt like for them and me, and this is what physical abuse. So there, I think firstly, you have to understand if you believe you're in a situation, because I think, you know, just going through an example of saying that the police can prosecute someone, even if the person on the receiving end doesn't wish to prosecute, the police can now still prosecute them. But that's not a permanent fix, because if that person withdraws their claim, or, you know, and then we know people drop charges, these are all common behaviors in domestic situations where the guilt starts coming, the mental manipulation starts coming. So yeah, there are charities, but I have to say we need to do more, because everybody's restricted with funding. Everyone's restricted to how much reach they can actually achieve to what they would like to achieve. So I think the biggest thing we can give away right now is free knowledge. Free knowledge is the biggest thing that hopefully we can cause a positive ripple effect to then, and as mentioned earlier, listen to that person. They might not be ready right now to take that step, but the support comes from people that have strength like us, whether we've experienced it in the past or you're a good friend to someone and you're listening to this right now and say, goodness me, I know so-and-so could do with a hug, so-and-so could do with a cup of tea today, and I'm just going to listen. So that's one thing. I think even as friends, we go quickly into advice mode because we just want to help someone. But maybe just listen to someone say what their situation is, because they're actually reflecting, they're actually sharing with you, and they need to hear it themselves. So giving them that space, where we're talking about giving someone that space to really connect with their mental health, they might walk away from that conversation and you may have said very little, and they'll say, how helpful was that? You know, Kerry's fantastic. She really helped me realize something, but really all the realization was done with themselves. They just gave themselves that space. So I think, you know, that there are charities out there such as the Refuge, such as Domestic Violence UK organizations. But I also equally see them, you know, everything cost in overheads, you know, answering the phones and so forth. So my plea would be for people who can offer free support within their circle, you know, and just listen to the people, and see. And I think a polite way of doing, if you're constantly being called upon, because this, I have to say, you know, you don't constantly want someone picking up the phone to you 2:00 in the morning and so forth, because this is where healthy boundaries come back in. So even if you're a friend supporting someone going through unfortunate circumstances, being a good friend may be, if you do receive that call, or if you do have a constant phone call, say, okay, lovely, I'm constantly having conversations with you. Where would you like my help to help you move on? Where would you like me to come with you to an organization? Is there something I can help you with? Then you can start moving the conversation forward, because the last thing anyone wants to do is become a constant agony aunt. Because as I said, there are yo-yo effects with mental and domestic situations where people constantly are trying to decide what they're going to do. So if you do want to help somebody move along, then start coaching the person in a soft way, that how can you help? What is it they really want from you?
Absolutely. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And most of the time, people that I have spoken with, most of the time they do just want that ear to bend, don't they? They just want to know that that person is there to sit and listen to them whilst they offload. The key for us is to make sure that we don't start taking on their emotions, their feelings, because the moment we start to do that, we're going to be far less helpful, obviously. And I'm very grateful that I've reached a point in my life. I think I reached this point about 2 or 3 years ago where I have that firm boundary in place. So I can empathize with people who are going through similar to what you and I have experienced.
Yeah.
But I'm no longer taking on those feelings. I'm no longer triggered. Which is an important place for us to be. Those of us that have experienced this before need to be in that place, in this place right now, where what we're listening to from other people is not going to trigger us and put us back potentially to where we were at that particular time. And yes, I agree. And this is something that I've always said as a coach. I mean, I've always wanted to help people. I've always had that desire right from a very young age. I just didn't realize, until probably about 10, 12 years ago, exactly in what capacity I wanted to help people. And I think it's important for people to know as well that as coaches are different to counsellors.
Yes.
With counselling, it's very much considered a talking therapy, which I know for a lot of people is very, very helpful, very useful. It wasn't for me. I didn't find it useful at all. What I wanted was somebody to say to me, well, okay, what do you want out of life? How can we deal with that particular significant emotional event and move you forward from that? I didn't want somebody to say, to pull it all apart and then sit there and actually analyze every tiny little bit of it, and how do you feel about that?
Yeah.
I don't mean that in a derogatory way either, because as I say, it works for an awful lot of people.
Yeah.
It just didn't work for me. So I realized that although I wanted to help people move forward from their negative experiences, in particular the domestic abuse, having experienced it myself, and also breakdowns, because I had a nervous breakdown towards the end. It was my awakening, I think. Right. Is how I like to describe it, because although I went through a few months of not knowing who I was, where I was, what I was doing, why I was doing it, I did wake up one morning and realized this light bulb came on, and it was like, I don't want to live like this anymore. But it wasn't that's it, I'm going to go out and end it type light bulb. It was I don't want to live like this anymore. And the only way it's going to change is if I change it. So I need to find a way out of this. I need a way to be able to move forward and improve my life, because, I wanted to love my life. I wanted to absolutely enjoy myself. And So that's what I mean by an awakening. So from that point onwards, I was obviously able to, I'm here where I'm here. But so with coaching, it's very much about moving forward. It's dealing with the emotions that are surrounding that significant emotional event, making peace with them, and moving forward, knowing what you want and helping people to move forward. Now, as coaches, we do charge for our time. However, for me, it's not about the money. It's never been about the money. it's always been about being able to help as many people in the most positive way that I possibly can. And it's about helping people move forward to achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah.
Not what I think, what they want. So, you know, I am more than, and I've already had this conversation with Adam and Kerry Duval, who have created this wonderful movement, the Mental Health Warriors. I have already said that I am more than happy to give my time for free.
Mm-hmm.
I would much prefer to help somebody for nothing than to say to them, oh, yes, I can help you, but it's going to cost you this much. And for them to go, I can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And then walk away. You know, that to me is not helping people. So, yeah, definitely.
I agree with you. And if you don't mind, I actually would like to give away 2 free books today.
Wow.
So if people want to, so that's my Instagram tag there at ffs_g.d.poetry. And then I will send you a copy. So send me a message on my Instagram. So a direct message privately, because I know you may want to keep it private. And I'm more than happy to send books to 2 people that show an interest, and I'll get those across to you. You have to obviously be open and prepared to share your postal address, which will be private. And if you feel comfortable with that, please do get in touch if you feel like what we've spoken about today has touched something and you want to kind of move on. And I just want to say you're absolutely right, Kerry. From my experience, and it sounds like from your experience, we're talking about that inner strength, and it's that moving forward motion that gets you out of it. So even for me, I had a 3-month-old baby. It was just me and her. And I thought, if we're going to get through this, we're going to get through this by me not stopping. And so I sadly didn't reach out. So I did it all on building myself back up very quickly and not looking back. So when there are beautiful people like yourself offering that support, I can only say, please be at a stage where you absolutely want to commit to Kerry helping you move forward. Be ready, because there's work to be done when you get to that stage. You know, there's going to be ugly days that you're going to probably just want to cry, and let those days happen. Let those days of crying on the sofa happen, because it's all part of your release. It's all part of your release to be part of me and Kerry smiling. And I'm sure there were moments where me and her didn't know that we were going to be smiling again. So absolutely, you know, the Mental Health Warriors, what a beautiful platform. And, you know, I feel honored to be a guest today, Kerry, and speaking with yourself. It's just meant so much.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here today, and to be able to talk so openly about an issue that affects so many people. You know, so thank you, and thank you for your really generous offer of giving away 2 copies of your book as well. That's absolutely amazing. I'm sure that we could talk for an awful lot longer about this subject. And, you know, it is one that's so important. And, you know, I know that you included, G, we can't stress enough how important it is that if you are in an abusive environment, and it doesn't have to be in an abusive relationship either. It could be that, you know, you're living in that environment, but you're seeing it happen to somebody else. Reach out to us, the Mental Health Warriors. Reach out to the Samaritans, and they will be able to point you in the right direction for people who are specialised in dealing with issues like this. But please do reach out. Don't suffer in silence. And please don't think that you're alone, because you absolutely are not. There is the support out there. Just reach out for it. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you so much, G, for joining us today. I'm really hoping that you'll come back at some point in the not too distant future, and we can have another conversation and perhaps go into things a little bit more deeply.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Yeah.
Thank you. Excellent
Thank
stuff. Everybody, thank you so much for watching this afternoon or this evening or this morning, whatever time it is in wherever you are in the world. And that's the Mental Health Warriors and Warrior TV signing off. Have a great week.